It's another late night recording, so please bear with me with this horrid lighting. Originally, I was planning on filming my setup video for my health and wellness tracker for 2025, but I started flipping through my health and wellness tracker for this year and realized that as we head into the new year, this was an opportunity for me to decide if there were any changes that I wanted to make. And once I went down that rabbit hole, I realized that I'm not quite ready to set up 2025 yet. So in this video, we are going to do a bit of a retrospective on 2024, what went well, what I would change, and then I'll show you some early experiments that I'm thinking about making, and I'll talk you through what I'm going to do for the rest of this year before I make any final decisions about 2025. I thought maybe it would be interesting to talk about where I'm coming from and why I'm thinking about making these changes, because I probably won't end up setting up my 2025 until December. So if you're a bit of a last minute person like me, hopefully hearing some of my thinking will be helpful for you. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then grab yourself a drink and a snack and something cozy to keep you company while we hang out. Today I am drinking a ginger and peach tea, and my snack of choice is an Uji matcha Kit Kat that we got from Japan. I am obsessed with these Kit Kats, and I'm going to be so sad when we finally finish eating them. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so this whole thing started because I was flipping through my 2024 tracker and I was just reflecting on how things went, and I'm pretty happy with how 2024 went. I've been pretty consistent. My goal last year was to keep these pages as minimal as possible so that I would feel encouraged to fill this out every week. In the past, I have tried to load up too many things that I want to track, and I end up getting overwhelmed, and I usually am unable to stay consistent. So in terms of that goal, this was very easy to keep up with. Setup took just a couple of minutes, and it's really rewarding to flip through this entire year and be able to have a record of what was going on. At the same time, as I was flipping through this, I had some observations, and I'm just looking at my notes on the side. Some of the observations were that I definitely made use of my notes. In the beginning, I used these notes as a place to make small comments about what was going on in my day. I found over time that that was just duplicating information that I track in other books. And so it ended up evolving into more of a place where I would talk about specifically health related things. So for example, things like doctor's appointments, or a lot of notes around what was going on with my skin. So I apologize if you've been following my channel for a while and you have gotten sick of me talking about my skin, but flipping through this book made me realize that I've been struggling with my eczema and cycling through pretty rough flare-ups for almost this entire year, which is really eye-opening for me to realize, because up until this more recent round of flare-ups, I've had my eczema kept pretty under control and I've been able to maintain it pretty well. And so I'm not sure what changed, but it's been really destabilizing for me to be struggling so much with this on an ongoing basis. And it really has had quite an impact on my overall mental health, my sleep, lots of things. And so one of the things I realized is it was challenging for me to get a really full picture of what was going on there, other than being able to flip through and see my notes that I can see even back in February I was struggling with it, but it's kind of hard to really have more information than that. And I do have a dermatology appointment in December, and I'm so looking forward to that so that I can fully get a little more help in terms of managing my symptoms. And that kind of got me thinking, if I went into the dermatology appointment and they started asking me to talk about my issues, how long I've been experiencing them, what my symptoms are, and the frequency of those symptoms, the severity of those symptoms. I really wouldn't be able to give a straight answer. I would be able to say like, oh, it's been on and off for a year, and maybe I could flip through this book and say, oh, you know, even back in February, I was experiencing those things, but I don't really have a clear way of knowing how long my flare-up lasted for, or how many days did I experience this symptom versus that symptom, and when did things kind of calm down, and what were some of the things that I tried during that time, because I have probably tried so many different creams this year. So that then got me thinking about the purpose of this book. And my mindset last year was the purpose was to increase my overall self-awareness and help me stay on top of my self-care plan by tracking some of the things that will be helpful to restore and maintain my physical, emotional, and mental well-being. So from that perspective, this has been absolutely amazing for helping me reflect on what's going on, and when I'm feeling off, I'm able to see some of the events that may be contributing to how I'm feeling in that moment. At the same time, I've been attending more doctor's appointments this year, and I've been taking my mental and physical health a little more seriously this year, which has involved more visits to the doctor to investigate things and also really trying to focus on my mental health. And there are common questions that doctors and mental health professionals are going to be asking you. And I realize that this book isn't necessarily set up in a way where I can easily answer those questions. So questions like, how many caffeinated drinks do you have in a day? Or how many alcoholic drinks are you having on a weekly basis? How much sleep are you getting? How's your mood? What are your energy levels like? And while I think these questions are really important for us to monitor for ourselves, because I think self-awareness is important, it's also very important to be able to accurately convey what's going on to your medical or mental health professional. My biggest takeaway from reviewing what's going on here is I'm not able to very quickly share that information. So as I was thinking about 2025, I was really thinking, what are the questions that I want this book to be able to answer? Whether that is for myself, for self-reflection, or whether that is for when I'm working with any other doctors or mental health professionals that I may be working with in 2025. And so that's kind of what led to this whole revamp of what's going on here. I started playing around with what a new layout could look like that would help me tell a better story about what's going on with my overall health and wellness. So I pulled out my old Hobonichi planner fail this year. This was a book that I had originally meant to use as a home and garden planner, and it didn't really work out. And so I realized it was a great place to play around with different layouts. So this is a layout that I am going to be testing for the next few weeks in my 2024 health and wellness planner. And the purpose of that is to give me what information I need before I set up 2025, because you will see shortly, and you probably already see, this is a lot more full compared to this layout. I feel good about my reasons why, but maybe the execution is something that is going to need to be finessed. So hopefully you can see this. I'm looking at my camera and I can see that it is quite dark. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure. Let me see if I can try to get a little more light. Okay, I have no idea if that's better. I will talk you through this so that you can at least follow along with what's going on. First, I flipped through my current health and wellness tracker, and I thought about what I wanted to keep and what was working well. So what was working well is I love doing the weather. It's maybe unnecessary, but I do think the weather has an impact on my overall mood. One thing I would like to figure out is whether I can find a way to add in things, more descriptors about the weather, like really humid, anything that might impact my skin. I found my skin really struggled over the summer when it was really hot and really humid. And of course, in the winter when it gets really dry and we turn the heaters on, that kind of thing. So I'm not too sure, but weather was working out really well. I really like tracking my mood and feelings, but I've always known that there is a duplication here where I kind of rate my mood here and then I move it over here into this graph. I really like these two graphs, but I did experiment with removing them in my new weekly spread. We will talk about that. I like tracking my habits, and I like having a section for notes and reflections. I also have a section here for notes, and this is a place where I've started in more recent weeks to track my sleep, because I have noticed that I have been struggling with interrupted sleep. So I'm kind of struggling to sleep through the night. So I've been kind of tracking the hours that I am asleep when I remember them. And I've been making a lot of notes about my skin. So this note section is very specific health related notes that tie to the day. Whereas this reflection section is more of like an overall view of the week, if I have any overall thoughts about the week. So those kinds of things are working out pretty well. One thing that I think is missing in my health and wellness is my meals. Previously, I had been tracking this information in my Hobonichi cousin earlier this year, and then I moved that information over into my meal planner just because I thought it would be interesting to compare my meal plan versus what I actually ate. However, this meal planner lives in my kitchen because this is something that I share with my partner and we plan together. So this always felt a little bit out of place. And so because I think it makes more sense to have a place to compare my meals to whatever else is going on with my skin and that kind of thing, I think I'm going to start tracking my meals in here. So very similar to my layout for 2024, I've got weather on the side, that hasn't changed. And then I've left this section here for tracking my meals. And then here I've left a note section so I can continue taking any kind of notes that feel very relevant to that day. So what I did was I just copied out, for the sake of the example, some of the things that I had here, and I put them here just to see how that would feel. And then this section is definitely the biggest change. So I have some sticky notes here to remind me of what the purpose of each section is. And this top one here are habits. And these are all based on my self-care plan. So I have another video, which I will link in my description, that I made last year about building a better self-care plan. I talk about the different areas that I prioritize in my self-care plan for my overall health and wellness. And it's more about the daily habits that are meant to be restorative and contribute to maintaining my health over time. So I've got things like exercise, journaling, being mindful, being social, and any kind of medication or supplements that I'm taking. So this section will help me answer questions like, how often do you exercise in a week? And what are some other activities that you're doing for your overall mental health? So I know journaling, for example, is really helpful for me. And last year I had meditation, which didn't really work out so well. So I'm changing this to mindful. So any kind of activity that is mindful for me. So maybe that's playing with fountain pen inks, or maybe that's crocheting or knitting. Basically, the goal here is to make sure that I'm setting aside some time every day to be mindful. And also, because I do struggle with allergies, at some point, if I end up seeing an allergist, which I'm starting to think may be something I might want to do, it'll be helpful to know when I'm taking allergy medication, but it'll also be helpful to have a record of the things that I'm eating in case I ever need to do something like an elimination diet, or try to look for patterns like when I'm eating certain foods, what's going on with my skin. So that's the first section. This section I'm calling tracker or trackers. Let me just fix that. So this section I'm calling trackers, and these are things that I want to be tracking on a weekly basis. So I've got things like water, because I realized that I'm really terrible at drinking the recommended number, glasses of water a day. And so I think I really need to integrate that back into my system. I forgot to put it in here, but I will re-add this in future versions. I also want to be tracking alcohol, so how many glasses am I drinking on a weekly basis? I don't drink that much anymore, so that should actually be as close to zero as possible, but I think it's important to track. Caffeine, so coffee, tea, anything else that may have caffeine in it. Mood, which was something that I was previously tracking. Anxiety, energy, sleep, and whether or not I've had sleep interruptions. So sleep is also something that I was tracking before. Anxiety and energy and mood are things that I want to be tracking on a long-term basis, because let's say I'm at a doctor and I'm noticing a trend in my anxiety. These are some of the questions that a doctor or even a psychiatrist or a psychologist might ask you, and these are factors that can be really helpful for diagnosing any kind of mental illness. So depression and anxiety are some of the more common ones, and of course there's ADHD. As a disclaimer, this is not meant to be a way to self-diagnose myself for any kind of mental disorders or mental issues. What it is meant to be is to track this information, because what I want this to be is a place for me to track information that I know a doctor or a mental health professional is going to be asking me about, so I can give them a more accurate answer and give them a better idea of how they can help me. So if I am experiencing depressive symptoms and it happens to be ongoing for more than 2 weeks, that may be one sign that I need to go to a doctor and get that checked out in case it is indicative of more serious issues. Same with anxiety. If I'm struggling with really high levels of anxiety for up to 6 months, that can be a red flag for a doctor or a mental health professional. So some of these things I chose based on the diagnostic criteria for common mood disorders like anxiety and major depressive disorder. And that's mainly because those are the most common issues and they tend to go hand in hand with ADHD. So I always want to make sure that I'm keeping on top of my overall mood and my anxiety and my energy levels. Not because I want to self-diagnose myself, because that is something you should do with a medical professional who is qualified to diagnose you, but I do feel very strongly about having accurate data and being self-aware enough to be able to spot a pattern and to be able to convey that to a professional. So that's how I came up with some of the things that I want to track. I recognize this looks like a lot and it looks kind of messy, but I didn't want to focus so much on visuals on this page. I really just wanted to have a place to be able to prompt myself and be able to answer, like, what are my anxiety levels or how are my energy levels? And that way, if I'm at a doctor's office or if I'm speaking with a professional who is asking me questions like, how are your energy levels and how long have you been experiencing them for, I will be able to answer them. What else do I want to say? The other thing that I like about this approach is when I'm going through a period where I'm experiencing high levels of anxiety or really low energy, it can feel like an eternity. But if I have a record of what was going on, then the next time I experience this period, I can look back on my history and see, oh, I did have that really rough patch, but it did eventually go away. And the same idea with my skin, because right now it feels like I've been struggling with eczema flare-ups all year long, and that's kind of true in that I haven't quite been able to manage my eczema to levels that I had experienced before. But the actual flare-up itself, when my skin gets the really angry rash and things are kind of painful, that hasn't been ongoing all year. And if I'm tracking it, then I'll be able to say, okay, the really inflamed period for me lasted maybe 4 days. And then it kind of transitioned over to that next stage where it was still not in great shape, but it wasn't hurting in the same way. And so it's a good reminder as well for me to know how long to expect for some of these flare-ups to clear up, because right now I don't necessarily feel like I know how long these things go for, which is part of the reason why I want to track them. So that leads me to this section for skin. I am not sure if this is the final way that I'll be tracking it, but what I have here so far is I want to track the flare-ups, so those periods where my skin gets really, really angry and how long it takes to heal. So I kind of have a key here where I have a big colored in dot for like the worst phase where it's really inflamed, a circle outline for when it's starting to heal, and then a really tiny dot for when I would be in that next phase where I'm almost fully recovered. I really want to start recording these things, and I think this information will be even more helpful when I eventually transfer this over into a more long-term view. As for these other things here, I wanted to track symptoms, and I wasn't exactly sure how to do that. I think this section will also change after I meet my dermatologist and I get a sense of what types of questions they ask me, and then I'll know what I should maybe start tracking. For now, I've put dryness, redness, and pain, which was inspired by a website that I came across. I wrote it down, eczemawise.org. I think it's a US-based app that is designed to help someone with eczema track everything related with flare-ups. And unfortunately, it's not available in Canada. So I took a look at some of the things that they showed in their demo of what they were tracking, and I just picked the things that I felt were most relevant for me. I think this might change, but the idea here is that I just track these levels on a 5-point scale. And my idea is that in my notes section, I will use these as inputs for a chart so I can see things more visually, but this will just be the data points. And then the final section here is what I'm calling notes and reflections. This is where I can track maybe thoughts that come to mind, like maybe unhelpful thoughts that I've been experiencing, maybe some behaviors that I'm noticing. So I've talked before about how I can be quite avoidant when I'm struggling with something. So maybe that's a place where I down when I'm avoiding things, like am I starting to isolate myself? Physical symptoms, so am I experiencing a lot of headaches or stomach aches, things like that. And also a place for me to just talk about what's going on. As an example here, I talked about a really great dinner that I had at a friend's, and I also talked about what was going on with my skin that week and where I was having the most trouble. I would also put things like new creams that I'm trying. So anything that I want to maybe start tracking. I also forgot to mention on the skin section, I have an other, and that is meant to be in case I start taking something. So let's say, for example, I get medication when I go to my dermatology appointment. Maybe this is a place where I start to track when I'm taking it. And that way I'll have that information of when I took it and what the impact of that was on my flare-up. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for this weekly view. I know this is quite maxed out with text, and it does look a little messy compared to what I had over here. But at the same time, there was a lot of unused space that I had previously been adding like stickers to, which I think is nice. But what I'm thinking is this is kind of like the very detailed page that allows me to dump what's going on and not think too hard about it, as long as I can keep consistent with updating this on a daily basis. And then my idea, which I haven't actually worked out yet, is all of this will be inputs into more visual trackers that I will have in my notes pages, because I do want to be able to have like a monthly view, ideally a yearly view of what's going on here, because I would like to answer questions like, how long have I been experiencing a flare-up? And instead of saying, oh, 5 days this week, I want to be able to say, oh, it went on for about 15 days. And I think that information is going to be a lot easier to access in a monthly view. And same thing with sleep and mood and anxiety and energy. I would love to chart all of these things out and be able to look for patterns in that way. So similar to what I kind of have here with sleep and mood, I would love to be able to have this combined visually together. So that is something that I am going to play with in the coming weeks because I haven't fully decided how I'm going to lay that out. I might borrow some ideas from Danielle from my Dandelion Diaries. She posted her health and wellness setup recently, and I really love the way she set up her charts for her monthly view. So if you haven't already seen her video, I highly recommend you check it out. The only thing that I want to play around with is whether there's a way that I can take all of this information and put it into a yearly view, because I don't know. I have to think about why I want to see it all in a year, but there's something about, for example, showing my runs and being able to see how many runs I did for the whole year, as opposed to month by month. And when I think about maybe a doctor asking me about, say, my anxiety, I don't necessarily think I would need to have that full year view to be able to answer, like, how have my levels been all year? But for some reason, I kind of want to have that. So if you have any suggestions or other people who have set things up like that that I should check out, please let me know. But that's really all that I had for you today. This is not exactly a full setup video, but I'm hoping it's helpful to share what I'm thinking in terms of my weekly view. And I will be trying this out in my current health and wellness. The only thing that I need to figure out is, unfortunately, I was so confident with this layout that I set up all of my rating stars for the rest of the year, because these are the most annoying to set up. So I don't know. I'm gonna see how this cream tape works. I got this in Japan, and this is what the label looks like. I think just for the sake of experimentation, I will try to white these out and I will experiment with using this layout. So I will know, I think, in a week or two whether this is way too much and whether or not I feel like I can keep up with it for an entire year. And I'm sure as I use this as well, I might think of some more tweaks. But I will update you in a future video and let you know how that's going. There's a chance I might not set up my 2025 health and wellness tracker until like December, because I want to give myself enough time to experiment with these layouts, and I also need to take some time to figure out how I would want to display that information on a monthly view, because right now the only monthly thing that I have is a recap that I do, which is more text-based and it's more about happy memories, highlights, lowlights, that kind of thing. So I do have some thinking to do and I just don't want to rush it. So let me know if you have any questions or comments or opinions on what I've got set up so far. And I will, of course, keep you updated on how this goes. I know this is a lot of writing, so I don't know. We'll see how I feel about that. But I'm really excited to refocus this health and wellness tracker and make it even more of a tool that I can use to help others help me. If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye! So good. Okay, bye for real.